I'm Roland Kemper, 50 male. For the last 15 years, I've lived a life that isn't really a life. It's more like an epilogue. I live in a small, one-bedroom apartment above a deli that always smells like garlic and cured meat. I get up, I go to my 9 to 5 job as a shipping coordinator, I come home, I eat something microwaved, and I go to sleep. It is a quiet, predictable, and profoundly lonely existence. This small life is the wreckage of a much larger one. Before this, I was a different man. I was the founder and CEO of Kier Logistics, a $60 million freight empire I'd built from a single rusty truck into a fleet that crossed half the country. I had a 7-bedroom house on a lake and a family I thought was perfect. I had a brilliant wife, Francine, and a son, Colton, who was the center of my universe. Then in the span of a few months, it was all gone. Wiped out in a divorce so brutal it didn't just end my marriage, it erased my identity. The story everyone believed, the one hammered into legal fact by a judge's gavel, was that I was a failure as a man. I was a workaholic who had chosen spreadsheets over bedtime stories, a father who had prioritized contracts over his son's baseball games. In the end, the court agreed. Francine got full custody of Colton, and she got the company, the house, the money, all of it. I was left with nothing but a court order to stay away. That was 15 years ago. I haven't seen my son since he was 8 years old. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My old life feels like a movie I watched a long time ago. Back then, my days were a blur of 16-hour pushes, endless negotiations, and the constant ringing adrenaline of building an empire. Kier Logistics was my baby, and I poured every ounce of myself into it. Francine, who I'd met at a supply chain conference, was just as brilliant. She was the one who streamlined our inventory systems while I was still figuring out Excel. We were a power couple, or so I thought. We had Colton, and I saw my work not as an escape, but as a sacrifice. I was building a fortress of financial security for my family, something that would last for generations. What I didn't see was the rot setting in. While I was taking calls during dinner, Francine was eating alone with our son. While I was flying to Chicago to land a new account, I was missing his school play. "He's playing George Washington," she'd tell me over the phone, her voice getting thinner each time. "Next time, I'd promise, as soon as this quarter ends." I genuinely believed it. I thought a few missed games were a small price to pay for the future I was building. I didn't realize that to an 8-year-old, his childhood is happening now, not in some abstract, secure future. After the divorce, I moved to Omaha and just disappeared. I took a simple logistics job, the kind I could have done in my sleep 15 years ago. I kept my head down, I paid my rent. I volunteered coaching Little League, staring at other men's sons and trying to picture what Colton looked like. Was his voice deeper? Did he still like dinosaurs? The silence from his side of the world was absolute. I was a ghost, haunting a life I no longer owned. The divorce papers landed on my desk on a Tuesday. Irreconcilable differences. Petition for full custody. Division of assets. The words were cold, clinical, and made no sense. I drove home, but the house was empty. Francine and Colton were gone. A note on the counter simply said her lawyer would be in touch. The courtroom was worse. It was a systematic public execution of my character. Francine's lawyer, a shark named Brennan, laid out a case that painted me as a monster of neglect. He had a binder thick as a phone book filled with exhibits. Exhibit A, 137 missed family events in 2 years. Exhibit B, travel schedules showing 206 days on the road. He even called Colton's teacher to the stand. She testified with pity in her eyes that for a Father's Day project, Colton couldn't think of a single memory of me staying for the whole thing. My own lawyer's defense sounded weak even to me. He loves his son, he argued. He was just building a future. Brennan's rebuttal cut me to the bone. "Your Honor, you can't deposit time in a bank and withdraw it later." The judge agreed. In one short hearing, my life was liquidated. Francine was awarded everything, including the $60 million company, to ensure stability for the child. I was granted supervised visitation twice a month. But the worst part came after. In the courthouse hallway, Francine finally looked at me. Her eyes were cold, devoid of the woman I'd loved. "He'll never know what a failure you are," she said, her voice flat. "I'll make sure he remembers you as someone important who had to leave for business. Bet." Ter that than knowing his father chose spreadsheets over bedtime stories. Then she walked away, and my life walked away with her. The supervised visitations, they never happened. She filed a complaint claiming I was unstable. The court suspended my rights, and that was it. The door was slammed shut. 15 years later, on a Tuesday night in November, I was heating up instant ramen when a knock echoed through my small apartment. 3 sharp, deliberate raps. I almost didn't answer. Nobody ever came here, but something about the knock felt intentional. I opened the door and my world tilted. A young man stood in the dim hallway, tall, wearing a nice coat. He was maybe 23, the light flickered but I could see his face. He had my jawline, but his eyes were Francine's. My heart stopped. He just looked at me, his own expression a mix of terror and desperate hope. Dad. The word hung in the air, a sound I hadn't heard in 15 years. My knees went weak. Colton, I whispered, gripping the doorframe. This was the boy I'd taught to tie his shoes, the boy who'd fall asleep on my shoulder, now a man I didn't recognize at all. He was holding an old Nike shoebox, the corners soft with age. His hands were shaking. Mom died last month, he said, the words sounding rehearsed. Pancreatic cancer it was fast. Francine dead, the woman who had ripped my life apart was gone. I felt nothing, just a cold, empty void. Colton must have seen the numbness in my face. Before you slam the door, he said quickly, you need to hear this. He held up the shoebox. She made a recording 2 weeks before the end. She told me to find you, Dad. She said the divorce, the $60 million, why she kept me from you. She said none of it was what I think. I stared at him, unable to process his words. My tiny apartment with its peeling paint and the smell of garlic felt like a movie set. This couldn't be real. I've been sitting in my car downstairs for 2 hours, he said, his voice cracking. Please, you need to hear what she said. I need you to hear it. I finally stepped aside, my body moving on autopilot, and let my son, a stranger, into my home. Colton sat on my threadbare couch, placing the shoebox on the coffee table between us like it was a bomb. His eyes scanned my apartment, landing on the one photo I kept, him, 5 years old, on my shoulders at the state fair, both of us covered in powdered sugar. You kept that, he said, his voice soft. I didn't know what to say. She died. He nodded, rubbing his face with his hands, a gesture that was purely mine. It was just me and her at the end. Her new husband died a few years ago. He opened the box. Inside, I saw bundles of letters tied with twine, all addressed to me in Francine's perfect handwriting. Beneath them was an old silver cassette recorder, the exact model we'd used to record Colton's first words. She wrote you these letters for years, Colton said, his fingers brushing the envelopes. Never sent them. I found them in her closet. He picked up the recorder. But this is what changes everything. She gave it to me, told me to listen to it alone after the funeral. She said it would explain things she was too ashamed to say while she was alive. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. What did she say, Colton? His eyes met mine and they were swimming with tears. Dad, what I'm about to play for you, it's going to rewrite everything. She wasn't protecting me from you, she was trying to protect you. He looked down at the small machine. She thought you were killing yourself with work. She thought she was saving you, but she got it wrong. She got it so catastrophically wrong, and she spent 15 years trapped in the lie she'd built. My mind couldn't form a coherent thought. 15 years of bitterness, of believing I was a failure, of hating her for what she'd done. And now this, my son who I thought hated me, was sitting in my cheap apartment telling me it was all a lie. He took a deep breath, his finger hovering over the play button. Are you ready? He asked. I could only nod. Colton pressed the button, a click, a hiss, and then her voice. It wasn't the strong, confident voice of my wife or the cold, hard voice from the courtroom. It was a whisper, fragile and thin, worn down by sickness and guilt. Colton, it began, my brave boy, if you're listening to this, maybe you found your father. There are things I should have told you, things I need him to know. There was a pause, a pained breath. Roland, she said, and my name sounded like a prayer. You never abandoned us, that's the first lie. You never chose work over family, not in your heart. The truth is so much worse because it makes me the villain. Her voice cracked. 2 months before I filed for divorce, I had headaches, crushing headaches. They did a scan, they found a shadow on my brow. And I stopped breathing. Colton was already crying silently, staring at the recorder. For 3 weeks I lived believing I was dying. I watched you, Roland, working 18-hour days, falling asleep at your desk. I thought, if I die, he'll work himself into the grave. Colton will lose us both. I became obsessed with saving you from yourself. The tumor was benign, she whispered. A simple procedure and I was fine, but those 3 weeks, they poisoned me. I saw death in every long day you worked, so I made a plan. If you wouldn't choose your family over your company, I would make the choice for you. I would take everything, force you to start over, find a new path. I felt sick, but I knew you, her voice continued. You're stubborn, you'd fight me, so I had to make you believe I hated you. I had to make you believe I was protecting Colton from you. The tape kept playing, and with every word, 15 years of my reality dissolved. The confession unspooled into the quiet room. My lawyer, Brennan, he was my cousin, he flew in to play the part. The teacher, I coached her on what to say, those missed school pickups. I faked half of them. I created a paper trail of neglect. Colton hit pause, his body shaking. Dad, I remembered you, he choked out. I remembered you teaching me to tie my shoes, reading to me, but she told me. She said my memories were wrong, that I was just remembering what I wanted to be true. He hit play again. The supervised visitations, Francine's voice said, full of shame. I faked incidents, said you seemed unstable, said Colton had nightmares, all lies, all to push you away until you'd give up. Her plan was to let me back in after a year or two, once I'd healed. But then she met Theodore, a kind, stable man. The lie became easier to maintain than the truth. 1 year became 5, then 10. She was a coward trapped by her own creation. And the money, Roland, the voice crackled. The $60 million, it's all still there. I never touched a dime. I put it in investment accounts. It was always yours. I was just waiting for the day I had the courage. But that day never came. The tape clicked off. The silence was deafening. I looked at Colton. He was looking at me, his face a wreck of confusion and grief. Dad, he said, his voice hoarse. I checked the accounts. The information was with the letters. It's $73 million. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. 15 years. 15 years of living in a tiny room above a deli, believing I was a worthless failure. 15 years of my son believing his father had abandoned him. All of it, a lie, a terrible, misguided, catastrophic lie born from fear. The confrontation wasn't with Francine, it was with the truth. It was the moment I realized my entire life, my entire identity, was built on a foundation of sand, and the tide had just come in. Colton stayed for 3 days. We didn't sleep. We talked. We read Francine's letters, each one a snapshot of a life I'd missed. Colton's first day of high school, his valedictorian speech, his acceptance into college for urban planning. She wrote about driving past a park in Omaha once and seeing me coach a little league team. She had to pull over, crying, because she was watching me coach other people's kids while she was telling our son I didn't care. The grief was overwhelming, not for Francine, but for the time, the 15 lost years. The $73 million felt like an insult, a meaningless pile of numbers that couldn't buy back a single missed birthday. What do we do now? Colton asked on the third morning. It's ours, I said, the words feeling strange. But we're going to use it to build something, something she would have understood even if her methods were wrong. That week we established the Kier Family Foundation. We funded it with half the money, dedicating it to providing free legal aid and counseling for families in divorce, with a focus on keeping fathers connected to their children. We called it Bridge the Gap. With the other half, I bought 3 trucks. I started a new company, Kier & Son Logistics. Small, manageable, nothing like the old empire. Colton laughed when he saw the papers. Dad, I'm an urban planner. I design transit systems. I don't drive trucks. You know how to move things efficiently, I replied. Besides, someone needs to make sure I'm home for dinner by 6. Last week Colton called. He and his girlfriend Piper are expecting a boy. We were talking about names, he said, his voice careful. How would you feel about Roland? I broke down. For the first time in 15 years, I truly cried. Just make sure, I managed to say, that you teach him the Rabbatan tree method for his shoes. The old shoebox sits on my bookshelf now, right next to that photo from the state fair. Beside it, there's a new one, me and Colton at a baseball game last month, grinning, our lives finally, painfully back on track. Forgiveness isn't out forgetting, it's about refusing to let the past poison the future. It's about building a bridge, even when your hands still remember the heat of the fire.